Coogs house. So that was the football season, I guess. how how we feeling?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to step by, please be sure to subscribe so you can listen to the latest on the Cougs all year long. If you're subscribed, our show should pop up on your feed each day, so be sure to make Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to YouTube. If you're tuning in with us on YouTube, you might notice that the scenery is a little different. As I said, I'm a Houston-born teacher and coach. We have some people staying at the house, and so I did sneak out to my this is my classroom, so that's the wall behind me. So welcome, a little bit new scenery. We had to get in and talk some about the football season, so that's where we are today. Just a reminder that this is the YouTube channel. We just got over 100 subscribers, so thank you to the 100 and it looks like 10 of you so far. Once we get to 250, we are going to give something away. This time around, we're giving out a Marcus Sasser t-shirt. We're going to get to talk to the artist of that. We've had some trouble getting in contact with getting things set up. I guess the artist. We're going to talk to that artist later. We're going to be giving one of those t-shirts away. They got a bunch of cool stuff, so I can't wait to talk to you more about that as we get there. Hit subscribe to be eligible to get that t-shirt. You just have to have been subscribed and be commenting on the videos. If you can't think of anything to say to this video because the football season's got you that down, tell us how you like to cut your sandwich. So today's episode, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the Houston Cougar football season that just wrapped up with a loss to the Tulsa Golden Hurricane. Houston did lose 37-30, fell to 7-5 on the season. If that's too dark and depressing for you, we can also give you the basketball episode coming out at the exact same time. Houston survived a tough win against Kent State at home on Saturday as well. A little bit happier vibes over there. So that is going to be on the at the same time. They're both released. So if you want to, after you want this, go tune into that, kind of cheer yourself up. That would be great. But in this episode, we're going to look at the Houston Cougar football season in three different aspects. We're going to look at what went well, because some things did go well in the game against Tulsa over the weekend. We're going to look at some things that did not go well, because a lot more things did not go so well. And then we're going to look at kind of like what comes next for the Houston Cougars, because that is the end of the regular season. And that, I think, leads to several questions on everyone's mind. So first, we're going to think about things that went well for the Cougs. I have to say that, like, this was not, obviously losing is not what you want to do, right? Losing 37-30 stinks because they left a lot of meat on the bone on Saturday. But I had a famous coach. He did very well. And he always said that a football game comes down to like 6 plays. He can't tell you before the game what 6 plays are going to be. They could all happen in the first quarter. They could all happen in the fourth quarter. They could all happen in overtime. They could all happen right before halftime. They're going to be sprinkled throughout the game. But this did feel like the kind of football game that like had those handful of plays sprinkled throughout it that just meant Houston lost the football game. They were not like, it wasn't a very one-sided football game. There was not like just a giant theme that ran through the football game. And some of the things that went well for Houston, I think we need to pat ourselves in the back on, or Clayton Tune did play like a guy that's going to get paid to play football after his career in Houston's over. He went 26 of 47, 386 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 pick, but I want to, give him credit for that 1 pick because it was a 4th down play call. He couldn't quite take off and run for it. So he threw his own jump ball to tight end Chris Trahan in the end zone. And while it did, Tulsa did come down with the ball, throwing the jump ball there's actually the right call. They were on like the 19-yard line, so there was a net loss of like a yard because the jump on the end zone. Tulsa comes down with it, so they get the ball out on the 20 and a touchback. Like, not a whole lot different than just not completing the pass or throwing in the dirt or whatever. And he wasn't going to get the first down running. So I'm not actually upset about the pick, but he did have a pick, I guess. He had great deep balls throughout this game to Tank Dell, Peyton Sawyer. The Tank Dell corner route was beautifully thrown ball to the outside just before Tank got out of the sideline in the side of the end zone. Great ball. Peyton Sawyer had a great catch and a great ball down the middle. He's got a great deep arm, and I think that was the kind of game that showcases, and we hope he sticks around, that was the kind of game that showcases why he may be a pro, why he may be making money playing football after leaving the U of H. Tank Dell, we'll talk some about him in later segments as well. But he had a punt return touchdown that was super pretty. He had the corner out we mentioned. Both of those things showed off explosive speed. He had another, it was like a little. He had a drag coming across the middle of the field where he like caught it, hooked it up, and went back to the outside. He showed that off in a number of different ways. He did hit the 100 catch mark. He did hit the 16 total touchdown mark, and so both those are kind of big numbers for a receiver to have on the season, especially in a season that bluntly probably feel like did not go as well as it should have. I want to credit him where credit's due there. That was a really, really impactful couple plays. And frankly, had Houston won the game, you could point to at least that punt return and that corner route as two of the plays that probably swung the thing their direction. Defensively, it's hard to find a lot of positives. I know. I want to shout out a couple guys on Sack Ave. I guess you could shout out the D-line and Sack Ave as a whole, but the Anthony Jones for sure. He became the kind of guy that they kind of had to run away from. If you're paying attention to their game plan, Tulsa shifted their game plan over the course of the game, had to run away from Anthony Jones. I'd also shout out Atlias Bell. He played all season. First of all, we kind of after the game didn't know he was going to get to play this season until about 24 hours before the UTSA game, which meant that, on his own hard work and preparation, he was ready to play. And then he played on the edge all season, kind of had like a more of a bully guy outside on the edge. It was nice to see. Not the best game for everyone else, but as a unit, I thought the defensive line continued to play really well. But I want to shout out those two guys. The other positive of this thing, and that this is not what I think fans want to hear, and this is certainly not something I would have wanted to hear back in August, but the season is not really over. The regular season is over. That was the end of the regular season. And with the loss, Houston's officially excluded from any chance at the American Athletic Conference Championship game. However, we do still get to go to the Boca Raton Bowl. It looks like we're projected right now to play Wyoming in the Boca Raton Bowl on December 20th. So get a trip to Boca in December. That's not so bad. It's another chance to see guys play. We have a really young roster with a bunch of guys that, bluntly, they had to fill in for hurt guys at DBs, hurt guys at linebacker, and we lost Derek Parrish super early on the D line. And seeing those young guys get more practice, they get a month more practice, right? And that's really, really key for a young building program, especially going into Big 12 play next year. Those guys get another set of game reps to go out and play. We don't really know who the quarterback's going to be next season, and so if Tank Dell opts not to play receiver, you can imagine Clayton Tune probably won't play quarterback in that game. They may both try and get ready and stay healthy for the pros afterwards. If that's the case, you kind of get a preview of what may be coming as far as running the ball more or who's going to be quarterback next season. I think the other thing this serves as, in a positive sense, is that Tulsa game is not the game you want to be selling to recruits or to people entering the transfer portal to come join up to go squad up and go play in the Big 12 next season. Bluntly, I feel like we are, going to have to hit that transfer portal window, get some guys in. If you got anyone from the age of that's out there playing college football and not happy where they're at, I'd say give them a call and see if you can get them back to the third ward. But I think that it'll be a kind of the bowl game itself, playing Wyoming, a team that Houston, if everyone shows up, should be able to beat. That will be a chance to kind of show off what we can do and really kind of hopefully pull some of those guys in for next season, because honestly, we're going to talk about them a lot this offseason. They're going to need a lot of help going into the Big 12 next season, and I'm sure that's going to be the way that they start hitting the road. Speaking of hitting the road, if you're hitting the road and looking for something new to do, LinkedIn Jobs is the place to do it. Now, LinkedIn Jobs is the place for every potential hire. Can feel like a high-stakes hire for your small business, but you want to be 100% certain that you have the highest access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. We don't know if there are going to be any new jobs being hired at the University of Houston's football program, but there might, and if there were, Houston would be adding the purple hashtag hiring frame to the LinkedIn profile. So you should be doing the same thing if you're trying to hire as well. They've got simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates faster. Post your jobs for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your jobs for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Now, with all of that said, I don't mean to dismiss this as some happy-go-lucky feel-good game, right? Plenty of things in the football game went wrong. So much so that Houston, after going up 14, I think it was 3 at one point in the first quarter, Houston jumped out early, had the special teams momentum. It was senior day. It was their first quarter. They were riding the high of the basketball team, won a big game earlier in the day. And frankly, if you're a scoreboard watching at home, you could see it around the stadium as well. There was an outside chance that a win in this game would catapult Houston to the American Athletic Championship game on next Saturday, right? We needed USF to beat Cincinnati, which would have forced a big three-way tie for second place if Houston could have beaten Tulsa. And if USF had beat, or not, sorry, we needed USF to beat Central Florida, I should have said, sorry. And then we'd have had a big three-way tie with ourselves in Cincinnati and Central Florida. And that all would have worked out to who's ranked higher in the polls. And a big win against Tulsa might have launched Houston just high enough in the polls to get to play Tulane again next Saturday and a chance to win the American Athletic Conference Championship in our last season in the American Conference. And notably, that's not what happened. Now, Central Florida also did win their game against South Florida at the end of the game and was kind of like a wild finish of itself. So it might have been moot, but it would have been nice to have that chance, right? It would have been nice to at least been okay, we did all we could do this week. Let's see what else is out there. And we didn't. So in looking at what went wrong, first in looking at the offense, I think Tulsa's defense is something really interesting in that they said, hey, you've got pro speed. We're going to try and keep it in front of us. And outside of a couple plays, and I mentioned those in talking about what Clayton Tune did well, they really did. They kept a lot of the short passes under 15 yards. They kept them in front. They rallied and made tackles. They did a great job with their game plan. And Houston only ran the ball it was less than 20 called runs. Now, some of those, I guess you could look at RPO type actions where Clayton pulls and throws it or whatever. But at the end of the day, that's not an effective game plan for that defense, right? Especially when you look at the success Houston had running the football. Houston was getting more than 5 yards a carry. That means that every other time you run the football, you get a first down. If you run it on second and third or first and third or second and fourth, on average, you're getting a first down. Now, I know if they'd have done more running, it probably kind of hurts the average there and da-da-da-da-da. I coach football, right? I understand that that's how these things go. But I will say that bluntly, I'd push it. I don't know why. You had Tajon Henry back, right? You had Brandon Campbell run the ball effectively. I've said all year long, I like watching Clayton Tune run it. And on senior day, I'd say sweep it to Tank Dell one time, right? Across the board here, I don't know why they didn't run the football more, given the bend, don't break defense that Tulsa was playing, because it would have been the most effective way to chip away at yardage as they were offering, especially once you're up early. You're not just eating away yards, you're eating away clock, right? And that double-edged sword that Houston chose not to use, I think got really dangerous. Now, that's not to say they couldn't have had other things go right for them all on offense, right? Obviously, they found ways to weasel past them for deep balls, and it felt like Houston got frustrated when the deep ball wasn't there. And I don't know if that's a function of we think of the Holgorsen offense, even from his first time through Houston with Case Keenum and those kind of things, right? We think of it as being this offense that goes vertical or gets screen passes for big gains or whatever. And we think of big plays, right? We think about Case Keenum throwing for nearly 20,000 yards in college, right? We think about big plays. And that's not what the Cougs were able to do this time around. And so the visible frustration, I think, is interesting because, what do you do, right? But I have to say that I would have hoped, and I don't think it was necessarily Clayton that was the most frustrated, but a fifth-year quarterback, a coach that has coached in big games before. Again, we're going to the Big 12 next year because we kind of think Holgorsen's the guy to lead us in the Big 12, right? I guess I would have hoped that theoretically wouldn't have gotten so frustrated with being unable to hit the big plays or as little as we did, right? Did Peyton Sawyer catch that big ball? Absolutely, right? Did I believe it was Matthew Golden, the second touchdown of the game, made a guy miss on the outside and took off, right? Like those kinds of things did happen, but because Tulsa was making Houston go for more of like the 8-12 yard pass, the 8-12 yard pass, Houston was getting frustrated with only taking that away. And it got ugly. The other thing is Houston had a bunch of drops. Different stat books are having different amounts of drops down the stretch. It felt like in the fourth quarter there's like 6 bad drops, and I mentioned that when I was bringing up Clayton Tune's stat line because I think the most universal stat would be that obviously that hurts him, but on the whole, that's not good, right? Like this pass happy offense, especially when we're not going to run the ball very much. That's not good. That's not something you can do. Defensively, if I'm looking at things that didn't go well for Houston. It kind of felt like the Kansas game in a weird way, and I don't mean to, liken to quarterbacks who run the football a lot. But Braylon Braxton destroyed Houston less often, but in similar type of ways that Jalen Daniels did at Kansas, right? If you think about the way that Houston had trouble with the second level of defense, that linebacking core tracking the football when they have to account for a running quarterback in power type games, it really, really hurt them a lot. I mean, he ran up the gut some, right? This was not a speedster off the edge or anything like that. This is not a wildcat type quarterback. This was when he lined up to run quarterback power. They might have faked the outside run or something, but then he ran behind the guards and found you up at the second level pretty quickly. Which kind of leads me to like a bigger theme of something that went wrong on Saturday's defense, and that was the tackling. Like Houston just tackled poorly, and honestly, like some of that's because you have a bunch of young defenders that were, slotted to be backups at the start of the season, right? We had injuries, we had to play them. It's the end of the regular season. You're kind of out of that excuse, but honestly, that probably does play some role. I don't want to make it the excuse, but it probably does play a role. And it was evident they had trouble tackling Braylon Braxton. I guess I could also bring up like that they didn't just have trouble tackling him. That was really, he had some backbreaking kind of things. Keelan Stokes, I think Houston did a good job of like, I guess I would have thought he'd have had more than 7 catches for 47 yards coming into the game, but the killer was obviously Juan Carlos Santana. And I admittedly, kid is from Katy. He's a senior. I'm sure he's got some like, I don't know, vitriol about like why didn't he end up at the U of H or whatever, because it's a little bit more sought after program. But man, oh man, I mentioned Stokes and Epps, their other 2 wideouts, and we got beat by Juan Carlos Santana. And there's all kinds of like fun guitar riff jokes, this, that, and the other thing, but like we couldn't find him. We couldn't cover him, couldn't find him. What is the official stat line here? It feels like 1,000 yards, but it was 6 catches for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. Couldn't find him. And at the end of the day, like, if I'm the one making the game plan, I admittedly in last week's preview talked about 2 other guys, and that's not what beat us. However, at some point, you got to think associate head coach and defensive coordinator Doug Belk would have found him. We had corners getting lost in zone coverage and things like that, and it's like, man, oh man, how do we cover that up? Now, any of Juan Carlos Stanton's touchdowns would have probably been the Tulsa Nissan moment of the week. What's awkward here is I've got to come up with a Houston Nissan thrilling moment of the week, because this week's thrilling moment of college football is brought to you by Nissan. Now, the thrilling designs behind this new lineup of Nissan are intended to empower drivers and vehicles that are capable as the driver themselves. When I think about like those unbelievable abilities on the football field for this week's thrilling moment, the only play that sticks out for me would be Tank Dell's punt return. Change directions a couple times and showed off explosive speed, right? The kind of way you could do in a car as well. I had to say it's kind of hard to think of one on the losing side of this, but that's the one that sticks out the most in my head. This segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. Now, all of that flushed behind us. We got to look at what comes next. And I think what's going to come first next, if that's a thing, is first next a thing? Production. Yes, first next is a thing. We're going to have to address what happened with Sam Brown. So wide receiver Sam Brown was caught on ESPN's cameras, not just on like cell phone camera, slapping Tulsa defensive back Bryson Powers. Bryson Powers is a sixth-year DB from Klein Collins High School, and Sam Brown slapped him in the face post-game. Powers covers the slot, and so there might have been some beef bleeding over from the game, but I don't recall and cannot find anything. And watching back some tape that looks like that, I guess I can zoom in on some stuff that might have happened off camera, but I haven't found anything like that. Bluntly, Bryson Powers was talking to Houston linebacker Donnie Mooten. They seem to be having a very collegial conversation. I don't I don't know what warranted this. It seemed kind of random, and frankly, Powers seemed kind of taken aback. As of the post-game press conference, Holgorsen had not heard of the event. You've seen some people, some of the higher ups from Houston on Twitter tweeting about like action will be taken or what have you. As of the recording of this episode on a Sunday afternoon, I need a little time to calm down, so I'm doing it Sunday afternoon. It doesn't seem like anything's happened yet. With the week off for Houston because there's championship week and we're not in the championship game, I'd imagine something does happen later. That's probably the first thing that happens next for Houston. More immediately, excuse me. More immediately, we're going to be looking at Dana Holgorsen and the coaching staff and kind of like who comes in and who comes out from this team. And I feel like there was some illuminating things in Holgorsen's press conference. He mentioned that this game meant a lot to Tulsa. And I think throughout the season, we kind of had this vibe that like a lot of the American Athletic Conference had this like bullseye on Houston because Houston's leaving, right? Houston's the team from the American, or one of the teams from the American, that got promoted in a weird way, right? Houston's going to get to go to the Big 12. And so like SMU kind of had this, why not us? Tulsa kind of has this, why not us, right? To some degree, South Florida has this, why not us, right? And all valid, right? Tulane, why not us? All these schools have a why not us feel because they've got building programs too. I mean, we've seen the American Athletic Conference for a while now, you and I, and it's been a strong conference. And so they're thinking, why does Houston get to go when we don't? And so that put a bullseye on Houston's back. But why didn't the game also mean a lot to Houston? It was there. That's the thing that bugs me at Holgorsen's press conference is he gave, because he's a head coach, he gave a lot of praise to Tulsa. He gave a lot of praise to their coaching staff and this and the other thing. But like saying it meant a lot to them just makes me question why it didn't mean a lot to us, right? We were not mathematically eliminated at kickoff from the American Athletic Conference title game. We should have been not only trying to win, but trying to show off while we did it, right? Like that's the only thing that makes sense there. He told the seniors he's sorry. Sorry now. Well, this game is not a product of last night. This game is a product of weeks and months of work. That's how everyone's games are. And it just feels late to say that. Saying things like the defense was allergic to turnovers, couldn't get a turnover, like that again, that is coaching to me. You coach to get turnovers. And so those kinds of things did bug me in the post-game press conference. And we just had Thanksgiving and we saw family. And I think my dad was like, Parker, like, yeah, your opinions are very known on this guy. And I think there's a lot of things Holgorsen does very, very well. I think he does call it creative offense. And when I give him a hard time, like I'd like to run the ball more in my own coaching brain. He does some things very, very well. You don't have multiple guys throw for 10,000 yards not knowing how to coach an offense, right? Like he knows what he's doing. There's just some of this nonchalantness and the stuff that's like, this is part of coaching, dude. Like this is something you got to take more control over. All that said, I do think that he had a fairly healthy outlook on like going into bowl season, resetting, building, growing, looking ahead to next year, right? Like those kinds of things felt healthy and good. I go back to, because Houston is now 7-5, right? A few years back, a quote we've been bringing up a lot since basically the loss to Tulane, right? Is that university president? This is not like AD. This is not like some key donor. This is not Fertitta and the Mattress Mac. University president Renu Couture said that we're hoping to build a football program that wasn't going to be content going 8-4, the kind of program that would fire coaches for going 8-4. We're hoping to build that kind of program, right? There was some, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the quote several years ago. And frankly, we've had some turnover since then, right? Even with a win in the Boca Raton Bowl, Houston's only going to be 8-5. Houston is currently 7-5. And there's a real world where like Clayton Tune and Tank Dell and a bunch of seniors opt out of playing. You unfortunately lose one or two guys to the transfer portal because they're pissed off about XYZ. All of a sudden you lose that game and you end the year 7-6. What's Houston going to do? We're clearly not that program we're not there yet that we're going to fire coaches for going 8-4, 7-5, because as we're recording this, right, Cincinnati, Fickle is going to Wisconsin and someone else is changing out. Like in the last 24 hours since the end of games and the start of this me recording this podcast, coaches have already started changing hands, right? Houston hasn't gotten in that game yet. But when are we? And if we're not there yet, what other steps we have to take between now and then to get there? Because we enter the Big 12 next season, and I'd imagine we're the underdog in just about every game in conference we play. And I don't know how that gets fixed quickly, and I worry what happens if it doesn't. We're going to talk about it all offseason long here, including, building up to the bowl game, and like we're going to hype that up because we're going to go beat the crap out of Wyoming, whoever it is. But we'll be doing that all year long here on Locked On Cougs. Make sure you subscribe and download the podcast wherever you get podcasts so you can follow along with us. If you want to talk about the Cougs, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, all the different social media handles. I'm at Painsworth512. It's PAINSWORTH 512. I love talking Cougs. The Rockets won 2 in a row. What? Astros won the World Series. The Texans play football, so I guess we can talk about them. We'll talk about all things Houston sports all the time. I also typically have a wall of sneakers behind me, so about sneakers with you as well. Again, that's Painsworth 512, PAINSWORTH 512 on all your social media handles. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. If you go tune into our basketball episode and make that your second listen today, that would be awesome. If you're looking for another thing to listen to today, let me recommend Locked On Big 12. Locked On Big 12 is doing a great job of talking about the conference that us Cougs are heading into next season. So go check out Josh and the great show he's got running over there. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Locked On Cougs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Go Cougs.